I got the ASMR effect, autonomous sensory meridian response, so it like affects you physically. In your piece, I was like, did he mean to make it sound like ASMR? Because it kind of does in a way.
I'm aware of it, and I like this kind of really like to have sound that is directly relating to us, no, that brings us somewhere.
First, I want to know, you're like banging on the bass, you're using a like percussion almost. Do you dedicate a certain bass to beat the crap out of?
Yeah, actually, with that one, like the Vallée de l'Étrange, which kind of it's Uncanny Valley, like translated into English, and so yeah, actually, I have a special bass for that kind of stuff. So yes. So for those motorized things, I'm doing it on another bass. But actually, all the prepared stuff I'm doing on my bass, and until now, fingers crossed, I didn't break a string, or the bass, which yeah, to be continued.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Knock on wood. I won't knock. I don't want to mess up the recording, but yeah, I was so fascinated by that piece as a bass player myself, but I'm always so afraid because my bass is old. I don't know how old yours is, but I'm always afraid of breaking something. Yeah. So I was like, I could never do this. I'd be so paranoid, and I love how you just go for it. Are you familiar with the ASMR concept?
Of sound, you mean? Like
yeah,
very. Yes, I'm yes. Yeah, I'm aware.
Yeah. When I listened to that piece, I got the ASMR effect, which stands for autonomous. I got notes here. So I had to take a note. Autonomous sensory meridian response. So it like affects you physically. In your piece, I was like, did he mean to make it sound like ASMR? Because it kind of does in a way.
Yeah, I'm aware of it, and I like this kind of really like to have sound that is directly relating to us, no, that brings us somewhere, and this to be very close. It's kind of always this idea to have like different motors on an external bass, which I call an augmented bass. And the idea is, so there are 8 motors on the bass, which all work on different parts of the bass. And on each of the part they are playing, there's a little mic, which brings it into external, like an octophonic settings. So there's kind of this ASMR effect where you have the impression to be very close to that region of the bass where this motor is hitting the bass. So there's this. It was a kind of the idea to be really almost to be in the bass in a way, like, and to be connected to it in this very close approached feel of sound. Yeah.
How did that journey start with using the bass in unusual, non-standard ways start? Like, did you start with motor the first time, or did you just, I saw at one point you took your end pin out and you're blowing through it. Like, what was the first different thing you explored?
I think it started all with preparations. To try to find other sounds, and that I feel like one thing led to the other in a way. And I always I had this need to look at my bass, or to look at it in a different way, or to find different angles to deal with my instrument, which kind of also in a way to stay kind of it helps me to interact with my instrument, to stay interested, to stay excited, to find ways. So in a way, I think the motors came first was one motor, and from there it went to different motors. Then I worked with 2 basses and 2 cellists. We worked kind of in a quarterphonic setting. And from there, I thought like, it would be interesting to have kind of an instrument that I'm not physically connected with, like playing it, but to have an external bass and to put motors on it, And so kind of one thing came to the other, and that's over a span of couple of years, in a way. And yeah, when you say, like, for me it was so I tried to find a very cheap bass in order to do this research or this work. And I remember first, like, being trying to do a hole in the bass was kind of a shock, like, as you say, like, your bass is like, it's the continuation of you. You want to make it vibrate. It's such a, yeah, it's such something so precious. And then suddenly to have this kind of to have to work it out or to find other things was kind of first a shock. Yeah.
I remember in college, I had a classical bass professor, and he was very physical with the bass, and I was afraid. Like, I was afraid to alter anything on my upright bass. And at one point he said, and I didn't want to take it into the shop. And at one point he said, "Lindsay, it's just a piece of wood. Like, if something breaks, you'll find a way to fix it." So I'm going to take a little bit of a turn into another project you did back in November of 2024. You were the chair of the SWR NEWJazz Meeting, and you featured your group, and I believe it's pronounced the Tuvalu Ensemble. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Awesome. And yeah, that was an amazing piece. Tell me how all that came about.
Yeah, I think it was it's a process. It's a couple of processes, I feel like, that kind of are bundled together in this Ensemble Tuvalu project. One point was, like, I was interested to, for example, we are standing and sitting in a circle. We are 8 musicians, and the audience is around us. So that's something I started, like, working, for example, with this when I was talking previously with the 2 basses and 2 cellos with the motors, where we were also sitting like the 4, and the idea to have the audience around us versus like being in a frontal thing. So that was one thing. And then when I was living in the southwest of France, I was working, we were like 2 dancers and 11 musicians, kind of working in nature, and kind of a more theater, kind of a theater piece. Le Barlengo, and that also really opened kind of different approach to how to address things. That helped me to do that. And then there was also a bit this Seventh Continent group, where it's a sextet, where their idea was kind of having a double trio or a triple duo, where you have kind of each instrument doubled, or you have kind of kind of a mirror of yourself, of what you do. And I found that really interesting. And also in the Seventh Continent, it's about the Great Garbage Patch, about the trash floating on the Pacific. I found that interesting, how to put that into music or to imagine something based on that. And so all that, and maybe a last one is like in Le Balengo, when I was in the Southwest, there is also Occitan language that they speak in the Southwest of France. So I could talk, I was working with poets also. And I found it really interesting to, for example, Jaume Privat, who works with a poet and works with that language in a contemporary way. And so I became interested in language also. And so, for example, for that ensemble Tuvalu, there is every musician kind of speaks a different language or incorporates it. So all this was kind of all this work, all this research kind of brought this Tuvalu Ensemble project together. And maybe a last thing, so I started also working with sound curtains. So it's kind of it's kind of a reverb in a way, like a plate reverb. And the idea was in this ensemble, in this project, to put them behind the audience, so each of us could activate those curtains. Like it's kind of an amplifier. And the idea was just that the audience is sitting inside, and you could kind of feel the sizzling or the sound, or just kind of create kind of a world in which the audience is placed, and then us, and yeah.
It's interesting you explain that the audience is inside, because previously you were talking about the bass, and you were saying how it was like being inside of the bass. So I'm seeing a theme of you really liking to be interactive, like inside of something, not just sitting listening for the audience, or you experiencing it as a performer too, it seems like. So that's very cool. I have questions about the sound panels, because or sound curtains. I was really interested in that. The visual, it's striking visually. The video, we'll put links in YouTube and everything. We'll put some clips here for people to see when they watch this. But those sound curtains, how do you experiment with that? Like, do you have a rehearsal space where you can experiment what that's like, or did you have to set it up in that performance space that Tuvalu was performing in? Just tell me more about the logistics. I'm just curious how you know if it's going to work or not with the piece.
Right. So that was a longer process, which started. I became interested in these exciters, right? And when you place them somewhere, they get amplified by the surface they are placed on, and so I worked on it in different moments. Like, for example, at home, I just put them in the bathroom, like I had two curtains, and I would just record certain sounds and play them back and see how it works. I tried different surfaces. I tried like sun, which is kind of a different surface, like metal, wood, plastic stuff, and also how it works visually. So that took long. And then I was doing a residency in Strasbourg. So that was a beginning where I could start working with these curtains, where I was working with kids from Germany and France that where I worked with French kids and with German kids. And at the end, that permitted me also to work on these curtains. And I worked with a cassette player where the kids recorded a lot of sounds. They walked around. It was kind of also against space, kind of the idea. And this permitted me to work on these curtains. And so sometimes, like when I was working on that, I had like 2-3 days in a place where I could install them. But most of the work was just in the bathroom, like putting two curtains up and being in my room, and like just trying to figure it out.
Very cool. Very cool. It sounds like it's another level of improvisation. You just got to go figure it out on site and see what happens. That's very exciting. Tell me more about the poetry that you picked for that piece. A lot of different languages. Is it 7 different languages for the 7 continents?
It is 7 languages, yeah.
is it favorite poetry that you've heard over the years that you picked out, or did you write somewhere? Do you know the poets, or?
No, it was also a process where I start. So the main idea of Ensemble Tuvalu, it's these islands on the Tuvalu, those 9 islands, and that through global change will or might disappear in 2050, if I'm correct, or at a certain moment. And I found that that image just very striking for a world that is in a change of a lot of of culture, how a culture can exist when it doesn't have its land, how etc. So many layers, and it spoke to me. So I wanted to find poems that work on the relation of humans with nature, the relation that humans have with nature and nature has with humans. So I was searching for, when I put this ensemble together, I was searching in the different languages for poems that resonates or would address this in very different ways. And so that was going on. I was really searching a lot on internet. I was exchanging with my musicians, saying like, "Oh, do you like that?" or "What about this?" I was asking people. I was really just buying books. Also, so it was a multiple. Yeah, it took some time to find them, and it was kind of a process. And I found it interesting. For example, there's for example a German poem that just came out in that year, where and then there's, for example, Artemis. She says a poem actually, I asked Artemis. I said, "Oh, do you have maybe an idea for a poem?" And actually Artemis said, "Oh, I have a friend poet. She has written a really great poem." So it went different ways. Some things I proposed, some I asked, and some I was researching.
Very cool. I might have missed it, but from conception of that piece to that performance that I saw the video of, how long did that whole process take? Because there was a lot of moving parts for that performance.
Took me maybe 10 months in all I got this, I knew that I could do that. So with the curtains to prepare that, it kind of was really steps, because until the last moment, for me, all this technical side, it's not bass player, and so all that was a challenge, and so it was in different chapters, and the same with the poem. So it took me, I think, in all, and to write it, to conceptualize it, to think what can we do, and so that, if I remember it correctly, 10 months.
Like 10 months. Wow. Yeah. And you're not just a bass player. You're like, I'm just a bass player. No, you're not. You're way more than that. You're a hell of a composer, among other things.
Door die lucht wat ons inasemt. Ach, dis al die lucht van die aarde oorweldig met die dun geluid van verdriet. Sedert ons die pad begin loop het, wordt ons saans donker van tong en vertaal ons ontbinding. Ons enkels ruik reeds die ruk, maar God, hoe sterk ons dijen, hoe vurig, hoe vlug van filigraan, die hart wat hamerend, die niet in muk.
we're going from Tuvalu to the Astghik Waterfall Suite, Armenia.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I see a theme happening with water. You know, a lot of your pieces have to deal with water.
That's true. It's true. There is, I find water really interesting, as in terms of flow, in our music, of how things flow together, how they transport different materia, and how it commutes, how it connects us also as humans, how we are traveling on it. All this, I don't know. And I find it nowadays so important where, with certain realities in our world, with water shortage, or where we realize the essence or the force or the strength or in many ways of water so it's true. It's kind of a ongoing and important element.
Is that a conscious decision or just happens that way?
Actually, when I started with the Seventh Continent, I think that was the first group where I was mentioned, or where I went and I really thought about it. But then when there was Ensemble Tuvalu, I kind of started, okay, there is kind of a theme there, So then it was conscious. First it was kind of something, oh, great, and okay, wait. And then it became clear that this is, and then I thought like, okay, it's interesting to really formulate maybe a period where you're really trying to grab this thematic of water, what it means musically, what it means in terms of how it connects us, how it also musically, how also water was always rivers were possibility to culture, to go to different points, to communicate, connect, and all that was kind of. I thought that's maybe good to do a chapter, and then let's see what's the next.
So. The Astghik Waterfall, that's in Armenia, is that correct?
Yes.
And have you been there?
Yes, I have been in Armenia, actually through my wife, which is Armenian. So, yeah, and that's how actually I could also meet all these wonderful musicians. For the Waterfall suite, I was very happy to meet musicians and to play and interact with musicians from Armenia and from Yerevan. So we got together in a studio, and it was really the first time, or maybe we had one or two rehearsals before to meet each other, where we could really play, and so it was a situation, like, let's try this, let's try those things, and it was beautiful. For example, Mar brought there in a poem, and a personal poem, so it was a very interesting experience. Also, for example, it's a traditional an instrument that you find in this region, but also in Armenia, very important, is kanun, this instrument. And so cool. It was very interesting to learn about this instrument and to meet experimental, open-minded improvisers, and to do something together.
And the other instrument is that called a tar? Is that how you say
exactly, it? Tar, yes. Mikhail, yes, exactly, a tar, which is also which I kind of knew, but really to hear it in live and to hear him playing it, Mikhail, is just beautiful, very.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, and to Western ears, we don't get to hear a lot of that in America. And I love how the upright bass, considered a Western instrument, it just blended so beautifully with all the tones, and it was just such a great landscape of music. So I was looking up Astghik too. I guess that's the Armenian goddess of water.
And it was interesting. We were so we were in Yerevan, and then we went. We traveled a bit, and so I was seeing waterfalls, and then I was researching, and I found it interesting. And then also in Armenian culture to kind of do the link. And also in a region where it's, I mean, in this part, of course, there is parts where it's drier. It was very interesting to see also the strengths and the importance of water.
Pascal has been super sweet to record with us when he's out in the country. Are you in France? Is that what you said?
Yes. Yeah, I'm in France right now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You're in France. So the internet's a little spotty, but I didn't want to take up too much of his time. So if he's still here with us, you just don't see him. But that's okay. I wanted to just dive into a couple more things with you. So we went from the Astghik Waterfall suite, right? And your latest album with Gerald, Cleaver, Liz Kosack, and Sakina, Abdou is called The Ocean Within Us. More water themes. Yeah.
Right. So, yes, that's right. So The Ocean Within Us is a phrase that I found in a book, and I find it really powerful and strong because, it really, I like the combination how kind of the outside world is mirrored in ourselves and the other way around. It says how vast actually the whole world is that we have in front of us, with us, but also inside us. And I found that super interesting to see that the world like that, to see it as something that is within us, and it kind of really brings us all together. And I like that.
This album, I feel like it really leans heavily on a groove and a pulse and more structure. So what drove you to creating within that kind of framework for this quartet as opposed to like a looser piece?
I was really wanting to play with Gerald, and I think it's this playing together, experiencing groove, and all the different projects we played together, kind of sculptured this kind of playing of energy. And I wanted to have a quartet and to bring those different ideas together in a groove, in a energetic, in this way. It's like, for example, there's some of the motor stuff I did on an external bass. I kind of brought them back on my bass. Was like, okay, I'd done all that stuff far away a little bit, or looking at another bass. I was like, oh, how is it to bring that on my bass and to be able to have this kind of sounds and also play kind of and have both things going on.
And Liz Kosack, I go back way back to my time at William Patterson with her. I got to play with her a lot back in the day, and it's so great to see her out and performing in Europe so much. But her sounds, what she does with synthesizer is just, it's so fun, and I feel like you never know what's going to come next, like in the best possible way.
Right.
So it's really cool to see you guys interact together. And of course, Gerald, Cleaver, and Sakina. Am I pronouncing
right?
her name?
Yes. Sakina, Abdou.
Yes. Nice. Yeah. So Gerald, Cleaver, do you play often with them? Like, how did that pairing come about with him on drums?
Yeah, I mean, with Gerald, it started, being back then in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And we've played once in a trio I had the Gerald joined for a tour, and that's how we really met and connected. And it was, it's a beautiful, really powerful experience to play with Gerald. And from there, we continued. We did a thing with Simon Nabatov, a record. And then, in different occasions, also like Gerald's band, Black Host, was a really great experience for me. And, like that. And then also with Gebhardt's band. And so we kind of continued playing together. So I was happy with that group to reconnect, because we haven't played for a little moment. And so that was the occasion. And yes, and as you said, with Liz and Sakina, I mean, both are so great musicians. Liz is really, her sounds, she's so sensitive, or suddenly like she can be very quiet, and suddenly it's so gestural, so powerful. And
yes.
And also the sound she has on her instrument, they can vary. She can bring in such a diverse world, and I really love how Sakina and Liz are both connecting and kind of creating almost like one voice together. And Liz has this capacity to be really like very attentive and very, very responsive and so strong intuitively and in her playing. So I really, really, love that in the group, and Sakina too, and in her forceful playing. And a little bit in this group, what I like is also, we were like, okay, let's use also our voices, which is something, like, for example, Gerald bringing in his voice, Liz singing a song, Sakina also, like on one solo, she plays, and then she sings kind of something, and I really, really, really love that. And then what I also found interesting that Gerald brought in, he's done like, I listened to some of his solo electronic music, and I found it interesting that he brings this world also into this group. So I was very excited that we could get together and work on that.
Do you have any plans with that quartet in the future to work on another project together, or expand it, or anything?
Yeah, I mean, with the quartet, I will, so our record came out. So I first was focusing on that to finish that, and then I want to book gigs for us, which will be, let's see. I mean, everybody's busy, so I have to find a period for everybody, and then to get. So I hope for next year to make that possible.
So now I'm going to take it, we just talked about the future. I'm going to take it back to Brooklyn, back to the New York days. So I want to know, when you look back on your time that you spent in Brooklyn, how did that style of music, it was a lot different and you've obviously evolved, but can you tell me how that music had an effect, if any, on your playing now? Like, did that set you up in any certain way?
Yes, I mean, this period was kind of founding, it was a very important period for me in many ways, not being in an environment where you're familiar with, in another culture. I learned so much about myself, about, so that's this side. But then, of course, the meetings, to meet so many great musicians, to be inspired, to be challenged, to jam, so these years were gay, to construct, to meet, to interact, to write, I feel that was the beginning of me learning how to do things, and I think that all those experiences, I'm carrying them now with me, and they helped me to kind of start to get something going or rolling, which I think if I would have not done that step, it would have not, it shook me, shaked me. Sorry. It kind of really, in a good way, that it really stimulated everything I feel coming after that, is a continuation of that.
Right. I feel like if you can start a solid foundation in New York City, greater New York City area, no matter what you do after that in your career, you can kind of handle it. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just, it kind of, as we say, puts you through the ringer, and I can't imagine, I mean, for me, it was a culture shock moving from Illinois, from the Midwest to the East Coast. So I can only imagine you coming from Europe in a totally different cultural backgrounds and then adopting that way. It must have been literally a trip.
It was great. It was a great trip, like the whole Brooklyn scene, especially after, I started studying, you're still in a school environment, but then okay, what are you going to do? How are you going to figure out things, to be, and playing the music of so many great musicians, and also this intensity, of every day, and these little venues that maybe less, yes. Or even the house concert series that a lot of people maybe outside is not aware, but everything that is kind of coming out of that, all these cross things, or playing at Goodbye Blue Monday, I remember,
yes.
and for example, or where you could see also suddenly other shows. It's a whole mixture, and also so talented and so passionate musician. You would come together and work together on music regularly, and it was just about the music.
Yeah, it was a special time. I remember I remember meeting you with Alan through Meets with Dimitri Mikelis, exactly. Who we knew from William Patterson. Yeah. And that's how we got to know you. And then from there, Alan worked with you circa, I want to say 2006. Wow, that's 20 years ago. But working with Face.
yesterday. Somebody around here selling dreams.
For me, this period is a founding period, Sorry, I didn't want,
Yeah.
but yeah. And it was Dimitri, of course. I remember, and that was when with Alan recorded.
Mm-hmm.
And that was our first recording together. I remember it was in New Jersey, and from there, we went to do so many things, playing Alan's music, rehearsing it, hanging together, playing in different settings. Also, the different venues. It was very. I also remember Alan also with voice, for example, using voice, also text.
Mm-hmm.
That was really special, and of course in the writing, and Dave and Cody and Travis Reuter, of course, and and also learning, from Alan a lot of things. Me coming from Europe, I didn't know, so that was really, really great to learn about,
Yeah, the Face album that was recorded in fall 2009 with you guys. We're literally calling it on the Birch Grove, our label, Birch Grove Media, fall 2009. We're going to put it out later this year. But we captured it, right? Like we've had that recording for years. And I just wanted that. And I love hearing your experience from that time period. So that album will definitely be a throwback, and we'll obviously keep you in the loop on when that's coming out. But it was definitely a moment in time that you can't really recreate, but it's just so cool that we all got to start that way.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I remember rehearsing at your place. We would come and then have, we were exchanging about the bass, about our, it was so great. And that's what I like about this period, and then, okay, here's the chart, and then looking and learning it, meeting also. Yeah. So that was a beautiful, really inspiring period.
Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time today, Pascal. I know we've been through the ringer, so to speak, with just getting this recorded. So I'm going to stop there for today. But I just wanted to thank you again for taking the time out with me from the French countryside to talk to me here. I'm in New Jersey still. So
thank you, Lindsay. Yeah, I'm so happy that we make it work.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please visit birchgrove.io. It's the home base for our record label, Birch Grove Media. You can buy a vinyl record or a digital album and sign up for our newsletter where you'll receive notifications about future events and releases. Also visit podfuelmedia.com. I'm one of the owners of this company, and if you like how this podcast was produced, we do that for our clients: audio, video edits, syndication, consulting, and startup for a new podcast. So book a call with us and we'll get your podcast going right away. You can also go to buymeacoffee.com/Birch Grove Media and leave us a tip if you'd like. Thank you very much.